We're in our last week of Radiate, and so across our campuses, we're finishing up, so a shout out to Sloan Creek. We are glad you're with us, and we're celebrating with you. Sloan Creek's got 16 baptisms this weekend, which is awesome, and we can clap for them. Woodbridge is living into their space, and all of you online, we're really excited to finish up this series called Radiate. Don't worry, I'm not speaking tonight. I hope to see people get a little bit itchy. I'm just hosting. I'm setting the table for a really great guest. But we are in our the last week of the series, Radiate. Jeff last week talked about power and how we can use our power, that God's given us a lot of power in lots of different ways, and how we can steward that and use that to advocate for others, and also how we can use that power collectively as a church to impact our community in some pretty deep ways. And we talked about two of those ways last week. We talked about kids without families, and we talked about poverty. And those are two things that we're tackling as a collective group, which is super exciting. And tonight, you get to hear, because tonight we're going to go a little bit specifically about how can each of us live a lifestyle of advocacy. How can we advocate for other people with the power God's given us? And we get to hear from two people tonight. I'm super excited that we get to hear from them who have kind of shaped their life and their vocation around advocating for others. And they lead an organization called Pivot, which has birthed out of Chase Oaks Church. And I just want to give you a little bit of a snapshot of Pivot because it's a pretty cool God story. About 18 months ago, we had some Chase Oakers who were using their power to advocate for others and come to us and say, hey, what can we do to help those in need in our community, to help those who are underemployed, to help those who need jobs and are hard to employ? How can we come around that? So we started to have that conversation. At the same time, we had a district attorney's office, and the DA goes to Chase Oaks, and he was wanting to advocate for people who seem to be on a path of kind of generational incarceration, where kind of generation after generation, their families ended up in jail or in prison or in a bad track, and he wanted to change that. And then we had our partners, our local community, advocating for single moms and those who are homeless and families that were in trouble, and all these conversations started happening. And felt like, all right, God, what do you want Chase Oaks to do about that? And so we convened a group of Chase Oakers because we didn't know exactly what to do. And so we've got a lot of power here, a lot of knowledge, a lot of skill, a lot of information. So we gathered a number of Chase Oakers to start talking about that. And what emerged out of that conversation was, hey, one thing that we can do, we can use our power of connection, our power of network to create jobs. If people had jobs, good jobs, living wage jobs, that would change their story. It'd change the trajectory of their life. It would change businesses in our community. They would have a different kingdom story to tell. It would change our partners. They could be way more effective in serving other people. And so as we thought about that, prayed about that, talked about that, decided to lean into that and say, okay, we're gonna do this. How do we create jobs? And so we started that process. And as we started that, we knew, you know what, this is gonna take some big leadership, some great leadership that we don't really have right now. And so we started to ask God to provide that leadership, and He's provided in a really great way. And so you get to hear from two of the people who lead Pivot tonight. One is Kenny Brown. Kenny's the executive director of Pivot staffing group that now connects businesses and local community partnerships and the church and the government together to create jobs for people who need to be advocated for. So Kenny leads that. And Kenny is a church planner. He's been an executive pastor. He and his wife Jen and their 4 kids have recently moved from Charlotte back to Dallas to lead Pivot. And if you've been around Chase Oaks for a while, Kenny was on our staff about a decade ago. And it's really great to have him back and to see how God has uniquely shaped him to lead this ministry. So you'll get to hear from Kenny a little bit later. And then the second person you'll hear from him first, is Reggie Nious. Reggie has a career and a life of advocacy. He's worked for an organization called Jobs for Life, Young Life, and he led an organization before he came to Chase Oaks called For Charlotte, which was an organization that connected churches to social causes. And so he and wife Vicky and kids just moved to Dallas recently and within the last 6 months to help launch Pivot. And already there's some incredible stories that are happening. You'll get to hear about some of those tonight. And over 20 people have jobs now that are changing their life and changing their story, and there's so many more to come. And so they're going to talk to us not just about Pivot, but what does it look like for each of us to advocate, to use our power for the good of other people. And so super excited that you'll get to hear from them. I think you'll be challenged. I think you'll be encouraged. And I need to stop talking so they can get up on the stage. And so would you give a warm Chase Oaks welcome across our campuses to Reggie Nious.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks. Well, hello. Can y'all hear me? So I just have to say on record, when Glenn introduced me and Kenny, this was the first time I've seen him smile, saying our names together. Normally when he says Kenny or Reggie, there's what did they do now? What are they up to now? So I'm just excited that I got that on video and I saw you smile when you said our name. So like Glenn said, my name's Reggie Nious, and me and my family, I have a beautiful wife, Vicky. We've been married 15 years. I have 2 children, Justice, who's about to turn 12. Then I have a 6-year-old daughter named Raina, who's 6, going on 26. But we just recently, 6 months ago, moved back to Dallas. I'm originally from Texas, and so I'm glad to be home. It is just great being here. So why would I move back to Texas? What brought me and my family here home? Leaving Charlotte, what we love, what we had grown accustomed to, why do we pick up everything to come here to try something new? And I'll tell you why. First, it was God who compelled us to move and be a part of this cause that Chase Oaks was launching on. And I don't know if you're too familiar with what Chase Oaks is doing, but Chase Oaks has embarked on this initiative to help individuals get back on their feet with jobs. And like Glenn said, one of the hardest things to do is to, once you've lost your voice, once you've lost your influence or your power in the community, once life happens, once something happens to you, it's hard to get back on your feet. But Chase Oaks is on the cutting edge. And they decided to take a chance and start this organization called Pivot, which helps individuals get jobs. Like Glenn said also, the DA and our local nonprofit partners instill in us these individuals, participants, who are coming through the program to get prepared for job readiness and for life skills training. And so what we do is we take them through a 2-week intensive. And during that intensive, we start working with them on job skills, what it looks like to interview for jobs, what it looks like to have a resume, what it looks like to have character and self-confidence, but also we deal with their past. We help them understand some of the bad stuff that's happened in their past, how to help get over it, and now get ready for what God has for you next. And so with that, we're just excited to be here. So quick story about me. I've been on Young Life staff for 15 years. I've been all up in the Northeast doing Young Life. And then after that, I left for 7 years to work for this organization called For Charlotte. And what For Charlotte did was, For Charlotte tried to connect churches to social causes. And we had a network of over 300 churches in Charlotte that we were trying to help push towards social causes. Immigration, refugees, job placement, single moms, things that were plaguing our community, but people were scared to stand up and say, I want to be a voice for that. And so I'm so happy that Chase Oaks has said, we want to be a voice in this community to help individuals change their lives. So, but that's hard. And people really don't know what an advocate is. And this is what an advocate is. An advocate is when you publicly recommend or support a particular cause or a person or a policy. And so we've decided that we really want to give people a chance to get back on their life. But we need to step up and do something about it. But we've lost our voice. A lot of people in the community don't know how to do that anymore. We have participants that we help. One lady, she comes to mind. She came through the program. We took her through the program. She went through, and during the program, there's a thing that we have to do called life planning. And while you're going through life planning, you tell your story and who you are. And after she told her story, she had this tragedy that happened in her life. And after she told it, she looked at us and said, go ahead and judge me. And we said, why would we judge you? And she goes, that's what the church does. The church judges. And I said, no, there's no judgment here. There's only love right here. And then we had another guy who had lost his job. Life just started spiraling downhill. He lost his apartment. He ended up living in his car. When he got into his car, he was just at his ends. And he came to us looking for help. And so we finally got him a place to live. We got him into a job to help him with his bills. And he looked at me leaving the church one day, and we just handed him some resources to help him get back on his feet. and he looked at me and he said, why is the church doing this? Why would the church help me? The church had lost its voice in the community. But it's not only the participants in our class. I have fellow brothers and sisters, Christians, family members who know what I do, and they ask me, like, why do y'all want to help people who broke the law? Why are you giving crooks, criminals, a second chance? Why are you helping drug addicts or recovering addicts to get back on their feet? They'll never get healed. They never want to work. They're lazy. And so I sit there and I'm just like baffled about how we've lost our voice. Not only has the church lost its voice inside the non-believing community, but we lost our voice with our own fellow brothers and sisters. And so when life gets like that, when life gets confusing, I like to go to Scripture, because Scripture helps me when I don't have the words to say. And there's a beautiful passage in the Bible, and it's Luke 10, and a lot of us are familiar with it, and it's the passage about the Good Samaritan. And the Good Samaritan is a classic story, and I'm sure a lot of you heard it, but it's a classic story dealing with culture, dealing with race, dealing with loving our enemies, and it's so relevant today. And in that passage, there's two verses that I really want to dig into and then talk about three ways we can advocate. But before I get into those two verses, I really want to just set up the background, this picture of Luke 10. There's a man who comes and he's standing in front of Jesus, and the Bible calls him a lawyer. And he's not the type of lawyer that we think of when we think of lawyer. He's an expert in the laws, the Moses laws. And so when they say he's a lawyer, that means he's an expert in the Jewish custom and the Jewish laws. And he was sent there to really test Jesus, to trap him. Jeff shared a couple of weeks ago that Pharisees didn't like Jesus, that they would call him a friend of the sinners, and that he would hang out with the wrong people. And so this man, this lawyer, is standing in front of Jesus, and he's telling Jesus, like, what do I have to do to get eternal life? And it was a common question of the day. We heard about a rich young ruler who asked the same question, what do I have to do to have eternal life? But the man knows the answer, and Jesus knows that this man is trying to test him. And so Jesus says, well, what's the law say? And the man says, well, love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, love him with all your strength and with all your mind. And Jesus says, that is correct. Go do this and you'll live. And then the man said, well, because he was upset, he said, well, who is my neighbor? And so Jesus, knowing that, tells him this story. And it's the parable of the Good Samaritan. And in the story, it starts at Luke 10, 31 through 32, and it says, and by chance, a priest was going down on the road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Likewise, a Levite also went, and he came to the place and saw. He passed by on the other side. So there was this man on the road, and he was beaten, and he was left half dead on the road. And when the Levite and the priest sees this man, they just pass by on the other side. They just go and don't do anything. And so Jesus is telling this story to this lawyer, and he starts with the Levite and the priest because the priest was something that this man, this lawyer, was familiar with. It was a person in his community. The priest was someone that the man would consider his neighbor. The priest shared the same belief system. He shared the same culture. He shared the same values as the lawyer. And so Jesus started with the priest to point out to the man that the person that you valued, the belief system that you're embarked on, who you want to be about, saw this man laying on the side of the road and did nothing. And then also the Levite. The Levite was a man who came from the tribe of Levi, and they were there to assist the priest in temple duties. And the Levite was very religious, very caught up in religious duties and religious activities. But the Levite did the same thing. When he saw the man, he passed on the other side. And so Jesus again shares this story to the man, knowing that the man will relate to the priest and the Levite, knowing that sometimes we get caught up in our religious duties. We get caught up in our religious activities. I know I'm guilty of being someone who's looked at people knowing they're in trouble, knowing they're hurting, knowing they're in pain, but I neglect to do anything because they don't share the same value as me, because they look different than me, because they didn't maybe grow up the same way that I did. And so Jesus uses these two things to test the man, the lawyer, in the situation. But the beautiful thing is that Jesus knows how to get back at us. Jesus pulled like a little Jedi move on him. And what he does is he says, but a Samaritan who was on a journey came up upon him, and when he saw him, he felt compassion. And he came to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. And he put him on his own beast and brought him to an inn and took care of him. On the next day, he took him out 2 denarii and gave them to him and said, take care of him. So Jesus is playing this little Jedi trick on him because Jewish hated the Samaritans. The Samaritans hated the Jews. It's just like if you're coming back from the AT&T Coliseum, that's the new Coliseum here, right? AT&T, big Cowboys fan, and you're leaving and you run out of gas. And all your Cowboy fans are just passing you, woo, 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 just going. They don't even care. But then here comes this Philadelphia Eagle fan, and he sees you on the side of the road, and he stops. He pulls out his gas can, fills you up, follows you, makes sure you get to the gas station, pumps it in, and makes sure you have $20 or whatever to keep going. So Jesus knew that this was going to ruffle some feathers because Samaritans and Jews couldn't stand each other. And Jesus tells him, hey, this man right here felt compassion. The first verse was, the man got off his donkey, and when he saw him, he felt compassion. Compassion is this powerful thing that we can't control. But once you lose heart for men, once you lose heart for people, compassion can go away. Take a look at this picture right here. This is a picture that's been famous the last couple of weeks. It's about a man who is from Mali, and he was a migrant in France. And he said in an interview that in France, I know people don't want me there. I know people look at me differently. I know people could tell that or feel like I'm beneath them. But one day he's passing by and he sees a little 4-year-old dangling from a building, 4 stories high. And this picture does it little justice, but there's a barrier right here. I don't know if y'all can see it. And so this man is trying to hold him, but he really can't. And so this guy just starts climbing up 4 stories high to get to this little boy. And when he gets to the little boy, he said, I can't help but feel compassion for him. I have children of my own. And so as I saw him hanging there, the next thing I knew, my feet just started moving, and I started climbing these 4 walls because compassion moves you to respond. And after seeing that, I did start doing a little bit more push-ups and pull-ups because if someone got stuck 1 story high right now, I couldn't help you. So I needed to start doing some push-ups. But one of the things that I love about this story is that it is precise, and it is so accurate to where we are today. And it points out 3 things that I would just like to share real quick about how we can advocate for people. So when you advocate for a person, you step into the situation without judging. The Bible said the man felt compassion, and he immediately did something. He didn't sit there and say, like, well, why are you on this road all by yourself? Well, how much money did you have? You probably deserve to be robbed if you're carrying that much money on you. Maybe you need to get some little buddy system so next time you go down this road, someone will be there for you. He didn't ask any of that stuff. He just jumped in and did something. I'm guilty of that all the time. When people do stuff, sometimes I want to sit back and say, like, you deserve that. Maybe you'll learn your lesson. Maybe you won't do it again. But when we advocate for people, we step in immediately without judging. Next thing we do, when you advocate for a person, you help with the immediate need. The man was beaten, nearly dead. And the Bible says he takes out some wine, and he takes out some oil, and he takes care of his wounds. When you have a situation, it's not time to give a story. I was at the Homeless Coalition the other day, and there's this lady in the community named Darcy, and she works with hundreds of homelessness individuals who are in the Collin County community. And they were asking her, Darcy, what do you need to help you with this job? And she says, I really need food. Because when a homeless person comes in and they sit down in front of me, they don't care about anything I have to say. All they want to deal with is some food. And once I give them some food, they're able to listen to me, and I'm able to get them to the next step. And so when you advocate for a person, you deal with the immediate need right there in front of them. The third thing you do is when you advocate for a person, you must know that it will cost you something. It's going to cost you something. It's going to cost you time. It's going to cost you money. It's going to cost you resources. It might even cost you your friends. But when you advocate, you know that it's going to cost you something. And one of the biggest things that I remember starting off and volunteering at this kitchen in Charlotte, and I remember I would look at people and I would try to choose who I was going to be a mentor to. Because I would look at someone and say like, ooh, that's a lot of time right there. Ooh, they're going to want to meet at 6 a.m. That's not me. Ooh, and so knowing that it will cost me time, it'll make me inconvenienced with my schedule, but when you advocate for somebody, it's going to cost you something. But why do we do it? Why do we do it? Jesus tells the man at the end, the lawyer who asked the question, who comes back and answers his own questions. Jesus asked him this question: which one was the good neighbor? And the lawyer said, the one who showed mercy. And Jesus told him, go do the same. And so we advocate for individuals because first Jesus did it for us while we were yet sinners. And then he tells us, go do the same. I want you to look at this video of a fellow Chase Oker who decided to go and step in the game and advocate for individuals and give them a chance and jobs.
My name is David Russell, and the company I have is Recreation Builder, and we build playgrounds, large commercial playgrounds. We were in the process of expanding already and looking to hire and where we were going to find these people. And it was in late November, and a video came on in the Sunday service, and it was Kenny talking about the diversion program, and it immediately clicked. And I turned to my wife and said, that's for us. That just excited me to no end, that I have an opportunity not just to hire somebody, to possibly have a part in life change and transformation in their lives. And Monday morning, I'm on the phone calling Kenny and leaving him a voicemail saying, please call me back. This is us. This is what we do. This is what we're looking to do, and I want to be a part of this program. We have hired guys in the past that have come out of prison. We've had guys that have been in rehab. We've given them a chance and worked with them. And we've had some success, but a very low success rate. And the beauty of what I liked about the diversion program is the support that goes around it. It's giving them a chance to change their life with the structure that's there. So it's not just the here's a job, it's the here's life coaching, here's financial counseling, here's support if it's drug testing, if it's whatever it is, meeting with the probation officer. There's just a full support structure put around it to try to give a much higher percentage of success out of a single opportunity. So I can give people opportunities every day long, but those that have support and have structure and have encouragement, somebody behind them, have a much better chance of being successful. That's what we have with the pivot staffing and the whole diversion program and even the Samaritan Inn. We started, and I guess almost immediately, Kenny had a candidate for us right after I talked to him. And that candidate, we interviewed, and it was a project in the raw is an understatement. And over the last 6 months, he has become a part of the team, and he has blossomed. I can trust him now to step out and give him the keys to the truck, give him the keys to the building, give him the alarm codes. He's now one of our entrusted employees. And we all had great hopes back in November when he started that maybe, possibly with the support structure, this could happen. But after 6 months, it's exciting. It still gives me chills to see what God has done in his life. And a lot of it's been his choices, that he is making good choices along the path. But it's exciting to see life change and to participate. As a business owner, I can just go out and hire any employee out there and just fill a job, let them do the work and reap the profits. Or I can look at it as an opportunity to step forward and to expound upon the gospel and to live into people's life exactly what Christ modeled for us in all the parables that he told. So we're not out handing out tracts, we're not out there evangelizing, but we're doing lifestyle evangelism of being able to impact these lives one at a time on a very personal level of where they are at home in their lives. And that's exciting to see.
Well, hello, Chase Oaks. It's good to be back in Texas. Not every hot summer day is it great to be back from Charlotte, but 12 years ago I was on staff, and it was just a great privilege to come back to Chase Oaks and work with Glenn and Jack and Jeff, and it's just amazing what's happened over the last few years here at this church. So it's just great to be here. When I hear the story of David and I hear Reggie talk, honestly, it's like I get inspired to be an advocate. But if I'm honest, I'm not real good at it. It's not something that really just comes naturally. It's something that I struggle, and I seem to miss more moments than I move into. I mean, just the other day, I'm working on this talk. And when I work on these talks, I like to go to a big parking lot, sit in the back under a tree, and just kind of write and talk to myself. And if I figure if I have nobody around, nobody will think I'm crazy. But that's what I do. And as I'm sitting there working on it, I look up, and there's a guy standing in front of me with a car with a flat tire, right in front of me. And I'm sitting there going, I don't know, I don't want to deal with this. It's hot out, it's 95. I'm busy. This guy could be crazy. He's 20 years old and a guy, right? He should know how to change a tire. I mean, those are just fundamental things that you should be able to do. And I'm coming up with all the reasons why I'm not getting out of the car. And about that time, this dude walks up and helps him. Now, it's slightly convicting, but it gets worse because then I decide to start critiquing. Have you ever done this? Critiquing the guys changing the tire. Like, you don't untighten that bolt yet, because if you do that, the car's going to fall on you in a minute. I'm going through the whole process, and I'm starting to critique, because heaven forbid I celebrate the fact that the guy got there. I just want to critique him. So I do all that, right? Now, just so you have context, I'm working on this talk. Reggie's already chosen the passage, and that is the Good Samaritan, right? The Good Samaritan, just to refresh, is about a priest and a Levite, right? Kind of religious folk who don't get out of the car, who walk past somebody. I have it sitting right here, and I don't move. I miss moments. You know what I know about all of us? We all miss moments, don't we? Every single one of us miss moments that are just sitting right in front of us. When you look at the passage of the Good Samaritan, two things jump off the page real quick. The first is advocacy is messy, and the second, advocacy is worth it. It is messy. I'm not going to stand up here and tell you it is the easiest thing you're ever going to do, because it's not. It is messed up. Many of us, if we pulled you up on stage and said, tell us about a time you were an advocate, and you would go, man, I was burned, and it took up so much time, and it cost me stuff, and I just don't know about that stuff. And you know what? It's easier to stay in the car. The others of you, just like me, right? I just don't have time. We live these maxed out lives running from an event here, work here, all these different things, and the thought of advocacy just seems to be overwhelming. We know it's risky and costly and timely, all these things. And what we found is it's sometimes easier just to stay in the car. But at the same time, we know it's worth it. Because if we're all honest, right, we know that lives are changed because people advocate for one another. They leverage the resources God's given them for someone else because it's worth it. Lives begin to change. So today, what I want to do is something really simple. I want to try to create enough clarity of direction so that we overcome our obstacles of concern. I want us to have so much clarity about this is where I need to step in. This is where I want to go. I want us to overcome the obstacles of time and all the things that kind of hold us back and say, you know what, this is just where God has us. And so that we step into those moments that lie right in front of us. So today I'm going to ask you 3 questions that I hope shape your voice as an advocate. The first question is this. What do you feel? What do you feel? Reggie did a great job of talking about compassion, and that's really what I mean by the word feel. What is it that moves your heart? So all of us watch commercials. We watch a ton of commercials every day, right? And if Jeff was sitting here, he would, of course, tell us a story about Alabama, right? And so if a commercial came up about Alabama, Jeff would be excited, and he would stay on the channel, and he would want to watch it. If the rest of us saw it, what would happen? We would change the channel. We'd watch a game about maybe the Aggies, right? Or Clemson, Oklahoma, something like that, anything. Or we might just turn the TV off because it's better than watching something on Alabama. My time might be really short here, all right? Might not invite it back. But what moves you? What moves you? Each of us move for different things. What is it that moves your heart? You know, Alan Platt said it really well. He said, you know, when you look through the scriptures, so often what you see is the disciples were concerned, but Jesus had compassion. Isn't that a great illustration? Some of us have concern about a lot of things. We want to be concerned about it, but what moves you? What moves your heart? And in this story of the Good Samaritan, you see them moving. And as Reggie talked about, he understood what it looked like to probably be an outcast of society. He understood what it looked like to be passed by. He understood what that looked like and felt like, and it shaped who he was. What moves you? What moves you? That's the first question. The second question is this. What do you see? What is it that you see? When you see this passage, what jumps out is it says, now by chance the priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise the Levite, when he came to the place, saw him and passed by on the other side. The word saw, that's the indictment, isn't it? They walk down the path. If they didn't see him, they get off the hook. If I don't see the guy sitting in front of me, I get off the hook, don't I? None of you go, well, come on, pastor, get out of the car. But what happens is he saw him. In the sense of when you see something, there comes a sense of responsibility. And that's what the indictment was. Just the other day, I love to mountain bike, but I'm terrible at it, all right? So I am too cautious and too slow to be a good mountain biker. But I literally take off one day, and I headed down, and it was about 5:30 in the afternoon. The shadows were terrible. And as the shadows were terrible, I decided to do something that I never do, and that is take my sunglasses off. And I have these really dark sunglasses, so I took them off so I could see. And immediately, everything gets a little more clear. So I go about 20 yards, and right under my foot is a copperhead. Yes, so I have the same feeling. I don't think any snake is good. I think the only good snake is a dead snake. I'm one of those guys, right? I pedal on down. I go another quarter of a mile. I turn a corner, and there's this massive copperhead right under my right foot. And I scream like my daughter. I literally just scream, and I literally about run into the tree. It is the worst thing. It's amazing how you can't ride a bike when you see a snake. It just wrecks you. And I literally about wreck. I go another quarter of a mile down and stop and just scream because of fear. So you can laugh at me, make fun of me, but that's what happened. And then I ride on, and I'm literally at one point walking my bike up, let me rephrase it, running my bike up this hill because I'm afraid there's got to be a snake somewhere that's about to get me. So literally I get home that night and I go, I got to go back. Why? Because I can't live in fear of these snakes. I can't do that. I got to go back. So I go back, I get on my bike, and what do? Put my sunglasses back on. Because it's a whole lot better not to know what's in the grass, right? Because I had never seen a snake before. It was a whole lot better just to put the sunglasses back on and ride. You know, sometimes when God shows us things, it's easier just to put the glasses back on, aren't they? Those things that pop out, and God takes these moments and shows you just a glimpse of the power you have and the power I have. And sometimes it's just easier to go, no, I didn't see that. Sometimes the plight of someone, and it's just easier to go, no, I didn't see that. Just a little glimpse of what could be if you and I stepped in to what he showed us. What have you seen? What is it that God put in front of you that you can live into? The third question, seeing comes with responsibility. The third question is this: what do you have? What do you have? All of us have resources, right? Every single one of us. Jeff talked about last week the collective power of all of us because we all have resources. And one of the amazing things about this passage is that the Samaritan comes along and he has resources. He has connections, and he leans into them and leverages them for someone else. What are the resources that we have? What is the resource you have? What is that you can give away to someone else, leverage for someone else so that their life gets better? What do you have? One of the cool opportunities I have and Reggie has is that we get to work with business leaders who have grabbed a hold of this concept. We're up to 15 different businesses now that we work with and help them find great employees. And one of the cool things is when they grab a hold of, man, I have the ability to change someone's life, it's really kind of fun to watch those guys and gals just go, man, I'm gonna go all in. And you heard a story of David Russell earlier, but one of the things I would tell you is it is amazing to watch how lives change. And there's this guy that just recently, last month, a guy named Carlos. And Carlos got a job, and it was really cool to see him get a job. He was in diversion, meaning that he had a felony, and he'd been charged with it. And so we started working with him. And he got a job, and he was thrilled. He went from making $8 to $30, $8 an hour, which is about $16,000, $17,000 a year, to over $30,000 a year. It was awesome. He worked all day long, did a great job, and all of a sudden, his work site changed, and the new work site ran a background check on him, and he had to be let go because he had a felony. And the business owner was just heartbroken about it. So I met with Carlos, and I said, Carlos, tell me, what are you thinking? And he said, I'm just going to go back to my old job. I'm just going to go back. And I said, to making $8 an hour hanging sheetrock? He said, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And I said, Carlos, can I ask you one question? Have you ever had anybody advocate for you? And he looks at me and says, this is pretty telling, isn't it? What does that mean? Because he didn't even know what it meant. And I said, it's when somebody goes to bat for you, when somebody goes on your behalf to someone else. And he's like, okay. And I said, do you know what this employer did? He went to the DA's office, got a letter of recommendation for you. And then he went out and went to this major business, which every person in this room knows, and advocated on your behalf, went to you and said, man, you gotta give this guy some grace. And they said no. And so we had to let him go. And I said, we had to let you go. I said, the employers we work with, this is what they do. They advocate for other people. They advocate for their employers, for their employees. And he said, man, I wanna be part of that. I wanna be part of one of those companies. So the next day, we got him an interview. He got the job. What was really cool is he went from making $30,000 to about $38,000. So now the dude moves up a little bit, which is really cool, right? Not only that, he works for 2 weeks, and he comes to us and says, hey, could my brother ever get a job? And we said, sure. So he's got to interview and do all that, so he does. And he gets a job. And next thing you know, this family is making $80,000 a year. Isn't that cool? That changes the trajectory of his kid's life, his mom and dad's life, his brother's life. Think about what that does for a family. You go from making less than $40,000 a year to making almost $80,000. Do you know the hero of that story? It's the employer. It's the employer. And you know why? Because he went to bat for somebody, and in that moment gave this guy a sense of dignity. It was a moment. He went to bat. He sacrificed his time, his energy, his emotion, and his potential even work on it to help somebody and change the trajectory of this guy's life. Because if he doesn't do that, the other guy goes back and makes $8 an hour. One guy changed the trajectory of that family's life. That's what we all have. What do you have? The cool thing is we work with business leaders to help them do good. So what we do all the time at Pivot, so I'm gonna give you a quick commercial of Pivot, all right? Here's the quick commercial. We help people who've done well do good. That's at the heart of what we do. And what we try to do is reduce the risk of doing good. And we do that by vetting, training, placing, and coaching people so that they're successful when they get into the job. Because what happens more than you ever know when I sit with a business leader, they say, I've tried this before. Just as David said in his video, I've tried it. Because many times we've tried it. What we're trying to do is reduce the risk. Because our hope and prayer is that we can ultimately create successful placements, right? Because our goal is that this scales. Our dream is the day that we have hundreds of people placed in our community. When we take the collective power of this whole church and the churches in our community that we've already begun partnerships with, take all of those resources and begin to help people get jobs that want jobs. And when that happens, we're gonna see things change, right? Jeff talked earlier about the brand of the church in the first week of this series, and it said, man, it struggles. Well, when this becomes our brand, that we help create opportunity and hope in the midst of despair, boy, it changes a lot of things because people are shocked by unexpected sacrifice and unexpected acceptance, aren't they? And this is the moment we get to be a part of that. So if you're a business leader and you're saying, hey, I want to be a part of this and I can create opportunity, what we want to do is just hold a quick meeting with you. So this is my commercial. On Wednesday, it's June 6th or June 13th at 6 o'clock, down in the office here on Legacy, we're going to hold a quick hour-long meeting. And it's all about what it looks like to partner with Pivot and how we can create opportunity, create jobs for people. And if you've been positioned and you have been given a role and you have a role that can create opportunity, we would love to meet with you. So if you can't make that, you can contact me. I would love to meet with you. But in reality, all of us have resources. All of us have resources in front of us that we can leverage for the kingdom of God. What is it that you have? What is it that God is shaping in you so that ultimately you can create your voice to cast out to the world around us? God is shaping what you feel, what you see, and what you have to create your voice for the community. God is shaping what you feel, what you see, and what you have to impact the people around you. As we start concluding tonight, I want to ask two simple steps of all of you. The first thing I'd love for you to do is, what is it and whom are you to be an advocate for? Whom do you need to be an advocate for? Answer that question. Just, who is that? When you think about what you feel, what you've seen, what God's opened your eyes toward, and what you have, what has God put together for you to be an advocate for? The second thing, what's your next step? What's your next step? Write down really simply, this is my next step. Maybe it's to come to a meeting with Pivot. Maybe it's to get somebody a job. Maybe it's to speak up next time that you're at a dinner party. Maybe it's the time to make a phone call that you're going, I just never really wanted to make. What is your next step? Andy Stanley said it really well. Do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. Do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. What's your one thing? What's your one thing? Advocacy is messy, but it is worth it. Advocacy is messy, but it is worth it. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be clean. It's going to be tough. In his latest book called Everybody Always, Bob Goff tells a story. I don't even know if it's true, so those are great pastor stories, right? But this is what he says. I'm out learning how to jump out of planes and parachute, and as I'm learning this, the guy says, let me tell you what happens if the parachute doesn't open. He says, you die. He goes, but you don't die the way you expect. He said, you don't die when you hit the ground, because that's not how you die. You die on the bounce. And the guy said, what are you talking about? He goes, well, you crush all the bones in your body, and then you bounce, and then at that point, they mess up all the organs in your body, and you die. And it's like, well, that's really refreshing. Way to end the sermon on that, right? But here's what Bob says. He said, you know what the church should be about? All of us are going to fall. Every single one of us. But who's going to catch him on the bounce? You see, our community is full of people who've fallen. And the role of the church is to catch people on the bounce and save their life. That's what we see happen with the Good Samaritan. He catches them on the bounce. Who do you need to catch on the bounce? Who do you need to come along and when they've fallen, catch them and bring life to them? Who's your person? What's your next step? Let's pray together. God, thanks for who you are and what you do. In the way that you position all of us uniquely to come alongside the people in our path. God, may you use all of us to advance your kingdom. May the 800,000 people know you more in our city because of the way that we follow the voice you've created in us. In Jesus' name, amen.